Good evening from L'Dor Va-Dor, and welcome to our Torah study and chat with Rabbi Barry Silver and our guest, Andrew Susman, who is an educator and cantorial soloist for L'Dor Va-Dor and other temples. We are pleased to speak tonight about the parsha, the Torah parsha, Genesis Toldot. And take it away, gentlemen.
We are very lucky to have Andy Susman with us today. He does great music for L'Dor Va-Dor. And tonight he's going to share some thoughts about the Torah passage and anything else that's on his mind. And we invite everyone here to also feel free to share any thoughts. We are not politically correct here. We are religiously correct. And we want to hear everything that you have to say, whether it agrees with our point of view or not. All views are welcome. And everyone is welcome. And so it's great to be here with all of you. And I always enjoy speaking with Cantorial Soloist Andy Susman. Andy, take it away.
Rabbi, did you say all Jews or all views? Or all Jews with views?
All of it. All Jews, all views, all news, everything.
Well, let me just sing a song that you're all familiar with. Ushaftem mayim bisason mimayne Yeshua. Shaftem mayim bisason mimayne Yeshua. Mayim, 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 mayim bisason, mayim, 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 mayim. Mayim bisason, hey, mayim, 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 bisason, mayim, 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 bisason. Now, there's a reason why I sang that, but I will mention that a little later. But the portion Toldot begins, these are the generations of Isaac. And that opening line is very similar to the opening of Noach. These are the generations of Noach. But there's a distinction there of the title of the parasha. One is Noach, and one is Toldot. And the reason why they do that, or so the rabbis say, is that Isaac is a link in a chain reaching back and ahead. And Isaac is kind of like a prototype or an archetype for each of us, where we are connected to the generations preceding, and we have a legacy to leave for those that follow. So on that note, I'm going to defer to Rabbi to kind of continue the chat, and then I have some citations I'll share with you in a moment. Okay,
well, this Torah reading was my Torah passage that I read for my bar mitzvah. Let's see, 52 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm looking now. Hold on, I'm going to get you a picture.
Okay. That'll be great.
My dad wrote this book explaining Judaism to Jews and Christians, which he handed out to people when he performed interfaith weddings.
Hey, Rabbi, will a donation of $18 or $36 get me a copy of that?
I can get it for you for free. I got plenty. And here is the picture of me.
Wow.
At my bar mitzvah with my dad holding the Torah. So I kind of remember this passage because it was my bar mitzvah passage. And I really like the passage, even though most people think not much happens. Something amazing happens. Isaac defeats his enemies by making them his friends. In this case, Isaac is he has a way of finding the wells, because he's digging the wells where his father had dug previously, which indicates that by remembering the deeds of his fathers and remembering what they had done and not letting it be forgotten, he was able to uncover wells of living water, according to the Torah. And the water is extremely important in that part of the world at that time. It's life-giving. It's even better than discovering oil. So he remembers the fathers. He discovers a well, and these shepherds from, because they're Philistines from Gerar, come over, and they take the well, they seize it. And their name is very interesting. The name is Gerar. It's kind of like, Grar! You know, they're aggressive. Grar! So then he digs some more wells, and then the people from the Philistines come over and take that one. And he just says, and he leaves there. He doesn't fight, doesn't argue, doesn't complain, just leaves. Then he digs a third well, and this time they don't fight over it. And they approach Isaac, and Isaac says, why are you coming to me? Don't you hate me? And they say, no, we now realize that you are blessed by the divine, that there's something blessed about you. It doesn't quite say why, either because he had the uncanny ability to find water, or because he was a man of peace and didn't fight, or maybe, probably it was both. But they come over and then they tell a white lie. And they say, we want to have a treaty with you because we want you to treat us well, just like we've always treated you well, and just like we've never done any harm to you. So they're rewriting history, making themselves look better than they were. But Isaac doesn't correct them. He doesn't say, what are you talking about? You guys were aggressive. He doesn't say anything like that. He just welcomes them and he prepares a feast for them. And together, it says at the end of this little vignette, and together they ate and they drank. Beautiful passage about how you can turn an enemy into a friend. And in that way, in one way, you defeat the enemy. You can't broaden this too much because we're also going to be commemorating Kristallnacht. We remember that there are times and there are people and there are adversaries who that appeal doesn't work. They only know strength. And if you try to appease them, they will destroy you. And sometimes you have to fight back. Isaac had the ability to know when you could befriend people and when it was not possible. And so we can't draw a generalization and say, well, we should always respond by just trying to ingratiate ourselves. We have to know the distinction, and he did. That's a beautiful passage. The other part of this passage, which is very interesting, is that it says that Esau is really, really hungry, and he wants something to eat. So his brother Isaac says to him, well, you know, if you want, I can provide you with some food. And so he says, but you're going to have, oh, it's actually Jacob, rather. Jacob says, I can provide you with some food. And he says, but you have to sell your birthright if you want it. So he does. Esau sells his birthright, as according to a legend, for a mess of pottage, for some stew. And he sells it and gives it away. And that way he loses the birthright. So this reminds us that there are many Jewish people who have a birthright of a great heritage, and they're very quick to give it up for no good reason. Today, we have many Jewish people who have abandoned their heritage, just like Esau, and they don't understand how valuable it is. It's up to us to try to help them see the value in it so that we don't give it up so easily. Andy, I'll turn it back over to you if you have any comments you'd like to share or commentary.
Andy
Do we
dropped
still
off.
have Andy on the line?
He dropped out. I think maybe he had a connectivity problem. Let me call
All
him
right.
in. So keep talking for a minute.
In that case, why don't we open up to others to either comment on the Torah reading or to share some thoughts on any other topic. Anybody else want to share some thoughts today?
Actually, you mentioned any other topic. I was going to wait to bring this, into the meeting, Barry, but I don't know when it would have been discussed. So you said, being that you said, does anyone have something to say about any other topic?
Go right ahead.
I read it. It's really interesting, and unfortunately, you didn't bring up the subject, so I always like to add to what you bring up, but I'm just going to come out of the blue and mention it, that I was reading a book on finance about investing, and the author who wrote this book, my goodness, the book has been around for quite a number of decades, but he told a story about how no matter how much we try to make things go right for ourselves, we always also, because of the human condition, have a way of messing things up. And he told a story, and it was actually he read a book, and he got the story from the book he read. He didn't mention the book he read, but he told the story about how when people invest, no matter how much they want to create, this wonderful portfolio for themselves, they always have a way of messing things up. So he told the story of an old woman who was sitting on the porch of her home, and she's sitting in an old rocking chair, and along comes a genie, and the genie says, "I will grant you 3 wishes." I mean, he literally just popped into her life, and she said to him, you know what, you little twerp, get lost. I've had plenty of men promise me things in the past, that they couldn't keep. He says, no, really. He says, try me. I'll grant you 3 wishes. So she says, okay. Highly skeptical. She says, all right, turn my old wooden rocking chair into a solid gold rocking chair. So he closes his eyes. The old woman is engulfed in a cloud of smoke, and when the smoke clears, she's sitting on a solid gold rocking chair. Well, she couldn't believe it, but there she was on the rocking chair. He says, all right, what will be your second wish? So she says, okay, turn me into the beautiful young woman with long blonde hair that I once was in my 20s. He closes his eyes. Again, she's engulfed in a cloud of smoke, and once the smoke clears, she is the way she looked in her 20s. And the genie says, take a look at your reflection in the window behind you. She looked exactly the way she wanted to look. She said, so the genie says, you got one more wish. And she couldn't wait. She absolutely couldn't wait to give the genie the last wish. So she says, okay, turn my old cat beside my new gold rocking chair into a young, handsome man who I could spend the rest of my days with and have intimacy. So again, she's engulfed in a cloud of smoke, and the cat is, and when the smoke clears, there before her is this handsome young man. Well, this woman, who's now in her 20s, just proceeds to throw herself at him. He puts out his arms, he holds her at arm's length, and he looks at her and he says, now, aren't you sorry you had me fixed? So the lesson was that no matter how much we try to make it right for ourselves, for some reason, because of the human condition, we always have a way of messing things up. And he gave that example with regard to an investment portfolio. But it's an interesting story, and I always like to add to what you have to say. But I didn't know when you'd bring up the subject of human error, So I wanted to tell that.
That's a good story. I'm not sure how to tie that in with the Torah reading for this week, but that is a very good story. I think it teaches us that we shouldn't neuter our lives, and we should take a stand one way or the other. We should not sit on the fence, and we shouldn't be neutral. Yeah, but that's a very good story. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Anyone else want to share something? Have we found Andy yet?
Well, I can riff on that a little bit.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Well, real quick, we'll weave Peter's comment into the thing. So not Isaac.
Jacob?
Esau and Jacob. So Jacob stole the birthright. And then Esau wanted revenge. So Yaakov had to seek refuge. And then there was a repayment when he had the double.
What happened here?
We lost Andy again.
Let's try this again. I'm sorry about that. So anyway, so when he went to his uncle Laban in Mesopotamia, he had he double dealt him with the marrying Leah first. So the idea there is just because you get one thing at one moment doesn't mean it's not going to have some little wonky stuff on the other side. So be careful what you wish for. There are the devil's in the details.
Jacob was a deceiver, but when he acquired the birthright, that really wasn't deceptive at that point. He legitimately made a deal with Esau, and he was very straightforward. He said, "Sell me your birthright for a mess of pottage," and Esau was all too willing to go along. That wasn't really the deceptive part. The deceptive part was when he wanted to ensure that he had the birthright, and then he dealt with his father Isaac, and then he dressed up and tried to pretend that he was Esau by making his arms more hairy and giving him some of his favorite food that he got from Esau, and then he impersonated Esau. That was the real deception. And then, he was deceived by Laban, his father-in-law, and then he deceived Laban afterwards to get more of the flock in another way. So there was deception throughout. So it doesn't always work that way. You can deceive people and sometimes get away with it, but the Torah likes to make it out that if you deceive someone, it's going to come back to haunt you. And the Torah also doesn't whitewash our ancestors by trying to make them appear perfect. They're not. And it's kind of unique among the literature. Most people's ancestors always come out perfect. Ours don't, but they do have some very wonderful qualities. Andy, anything else?
So, yeah, I'm going to screen share. I want to show you some text I was looking at earlier. Okay. Oh, you disabled the screen sharing. Can you re-enable me? Yeah, re-enable me as a host or co-host. I guess I'm probably a co-host again now. There we go. Let's see. There it is. Boom. Okay, I'm sure you can all see that. And okay, so Toldot. And this is an excerpt from a book by Rabbi Jonathan Kligler, who is a very well-known Jew Reconstructionist rabbi. And so this title of this particular parsha, he calls Isaac Digs His Father's Wells Anew. And so the reason why we uses that title is that the Palestinians or the Philistines covered up the wells that the father originally dug. And as Rabbi was saying, there was some complications with the Philistines. They were reacquiring the wells and whatnot. So Isaac had to dig them anew. He had to rediscover his ancestry or his heritage. And the way it goes is that we all inherit Mishigas. And the question is, how much of that is just Mishigas or irrelevant, or how much of that can we draw sustenance from? And so the idea is that our heritage, our ancestry can well be, I guess I use that word, pun intended, can well be a source of inspiration depending on how we frame it. And the idea is we need to mine or harvest the water of the living waters from our own heritage so we can come up with our own narrative to pass on to our children. And how we navigate that is the challenge. So let me share something with you I came across, which was rather interesting. So let's see what page we're on here. That's 21. Okay. So, okay, if you look at the top of the page where it says we are tasked, right up here. Well, is this a word? No, it's a word. So yeah, it's okay. We are, let me get rid of that. It says we are tasked with healing from the traumas that were willy-nilly inflicted upon us while figuring out what parts of the legacy we want to integrate into our own lives and pass on to the next generation. So if you go a little further down to the last paragraph, one of the names for God in the Torah, let me scroll up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that or not. I can make it a little bit larger. There we go.
I can see.
One of the names for God in the Torah is Mekor Mayim Chayim, the source of living waters. In the Jewish tradition, underground aquifers are a metaphor for the infinite fullness of life that, though unseen, is always flowing beneath the surface of our finite lives. So in order to tap that flow and be sustained by it, we must dig down, remove the rubble that impedes our connection, and create openings and so forth. So Isaac was like a bridge. He was connecting what his heritage was from Abraham to provide for the next chapter in the lineage of our tradition. And we're all familiar with the Avot in the Amidah, the opening passage where it says, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. So each generation has to establish its own relationship with God, its own perspective on God. And I told Rabbi that I would weave this narrative back to where Rabbi is coming from. We are here under the auspices of L'Dor Va-Dor, and Rabbi has a very unique frame on Judaism. And so he often references his father, but he has made L'Dor Va-Dor into something, the next iteration. He's expanding the brand, he's moving it forward so that into the 21st century. And so we are here to channel that. And this particular Torah portion emphasizes that it's our responsibility to bridge. Like I said, Isaac is a archetype for how to be a bridge between the generations. So Rabbi is that bridge from his father's frame on Judaism, and he's making something that's unique. You're familiar with the terminology, cosmic Judaism or inspirational Judaism. So let me see if I can find one more passage here, or not.
Add something to that.
Let's see here. Okay, one final teaching here at the bottom here. One final teaching. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, was asked why in the Amidah the central prayer begins with the God of Isaac. There, you can read it yourself there. Jacob, Isaac, and Jacob. Because once again, each generation, the last sentence, each grasped God in his own way, and so must each of us. Only then will God's presence continue to dwell in the world. And the last paragraph is beautiful. Tell you what, I'll be quiet. You can maybe read that yourself, and I'll make a closing comment about what you read. So I'll be quiet for a minute.
I gotta make a comment about this.
So that quote that you see there at the end of that second to last paragraph, what is old shall be made new, and what is new shall be made holy. That Avraham Yitzhak Kook was the chief rabbi the first chief rabbi of the modern state of Israel. And he, even though he was Orthodox, he was very open to all perspectives. And he got a lot of enemies in the Orthodox community because he was so tolerant. But that phrase has become the anthem, or the what's it called? The tagline of Reconstructionist Judaism, and I love it. To make the old new and the new holy. And that is really where I come from. I am a pan-Judaic, trans-Judaic. All the denominations have something to share. I personally don't have any allegiance to one particular movement, and that's what's so attractive about L'Dor Va-Dor. It's expansive and likes to move the narrative forward. And so, one more quote, if you're familiar with Mordechai Kaplan, who was the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism. He said, tradition gets a vote, but not a veto. And how many times when you're involved with, for argument's sake, we'll say conservative or orthodox, they abrogate innovation. They are very, very slow to allow for change. Whereas Reform or Reconstructionist or Jewish renewal are much more fluid in that regard. And so I'm grateful to be alive now that we are the beneficiaries of the innovation. We certainly are aware of innovation in technology. Here we are on Zoom, and that same openness to innovation in technology would do us well to try to weave tradition with modernity. And that's what Rabbi Barry does. Back to you, Rabbi.
Well, that's why I really enjoy having Andy with us, because he not only provides beautiful music, but he is a wealth of information about not just Jewish tradition, but spirituality. I would like to, as Andy would say, riff off of what he said, or to embellish what he said by reading from my father's book, the very page opposite where the picture is of me. And maybe this is where I get my inspiration from, but I think it's very interesting, and it ties in perfectly with what Andy was talking about in a way that may surprise you. So my father has a dialogue, a pretend dialogue with someone who's inquiring, and the dialogue goes like this. Tell me something about Reformed Judaism. Did I hear you say Reformed? Yes, is that wrong? We do not refer to it as Reformed, but as Reform. Why? Because Reformed implies that we have arrived at a certain place and are going to remain there. But Reform means returning, that the process of change is continuing. The process of change, is that the characteristic of Reform? There are many characteristics of Reform. As for making changes, we have changed the attitude towards change. I don't follow. Let me try to explain. One thing that has always marked Judaism is its ability to adapt itself to new circumstances by making adjustments. You mean by adopting new ideas? Not necessarily. The remarkable thing about Judaism is that it always held on fast to its basic ideas. What are they? Well, for one, that the world is a unit. What is the significance of that idea? It's quite significant. If you accept the idea that the world is a unit, you feel a new horror towards hatred and hostility, because then every conflict becomes a civil war. There's nothing civil about a civil war. Right. And if you accept that the idea that the world is a unit, you more easily see that the author of the world is himself one, and one who transcends the work of his hands. Here you find the key to the unique Jewish idea of God's oneness. We don't believe that the world was created accidentally and that therefore there is no God. We don't believe that the universe is split into two forces, one good and one evil. We believe rather that the evil and tragedy of life represent incompleteness which God and man in partnership must remedy. Nor do we subscribe to any splitting up of godliness into three or any other number. And if you accept the belief in God's unity, it must follow that all of the world's people represent one family, each one containing a bit of godliness, and therefore so precious that we must not harm nor hurt one another. Because the person who is poor or oppressed is your brother. You must share what you have with him. This is what motivated Joseph in the Bible, and is the ground principle for the practice of charity among Jews. This explains why Judaism provided the genesis of democracy, of mutual aid societies, of efforts for peace, of educational programs designed to fill up the mind with knowledge that will prompt the heart to obey the teachings of the Lord. All this comes from Reform Judaism? No, all this is fundamental Judaism. And how does Reform Judaism enter the picture? Well, these principles were symbolized through a number of practices in ancient times. And then what? Well, the practices changed from era to era. The need for giving up some of your means for good causes was formerly illustrated by the system of animal sacrifices, but Judaism outgrew this custom. and other illustrative rituals were adopted. The process of change was deliberately advanced in each generation. Beginning with the time of the Bible? Yes, the Bible itself represents many changes. From primitive ideas to sublime ideals, it was written over a period of 1,500 years. Then afterwards, as new situations arose, the sages adjusted the teachings of the Bible to their times. You mean another Bible was written? Well, not quite another Bible. Commentaries on the Bible were produced, bringing the biblical regulations up to date. One set of commentaries was called the Mishnah, and the addenda to the Mishnah were called the Gemara, and both of them together are known as the Talmud. This sounds like what happened in the United States. The law was the Constitution, then new laws based on the Constitution were written. Right you are. The Bible could be called the Jewish Constitution. The Talmud might be compared to the laws which flowed from the Constitution. I'm going to skip over to the main thrust of what I wanted to say here, and then I'll open it up for discussion. It says, so what happened to this process of change? And then my father gives this answer. What happened was that a group of laymen revised the Orthodox worship practices and boldly made changes in Jewish ritual and customs comparable to those that have been made in biblical and Talmudic times. The most remarkable, the most notable of the laymen who pioneered in these measures was Israel Jacobson, who at great cost to himself financially and in terms of popularity sponsored a synagogue and introduced so many changes in Jewish forms that the movement he started is called Reform Judaism. And what do you think the name implies? The name is significant. I wanted to get to another part. Hold on one second. He says, I'll try to clarify. As I've said, the process of fluidity and change always marked Judaism. Then in the 16th century, a rabbi named Joseph Caro collected the majority decisions of the Talmudic rabbis and set them down in a book. What was its purpose? His purpose was merely to make a record of what the sages had agreed on. But his book, known as the Set Table, in Hebrew Shulchan Aruch, was lifted to a new dimension by others. What do you mean by that? Caro had meant to list the practices that were the last word, but others began to regard his book as though it were the final word. The result was the slowdown of the process of interpretation, modification, elaboration. Something new had entered Judaism, the freezing of its forms. This is what today we call orthodoxy, one of the most drastic reforms that Judaism ever underwent. So what my father is saying is that reform and change is Judaism. That's what Judaism is. Orthodoxy, which tries to freeze Judaism, is the opposite of what Judaism has always done. And therefore it's something that is not, it seems weird, but it's not traditional Judaism. Traditional Judaism is change. But what happened was Reformed Judaism became reformed and is pretty much frozen. And so what we do at L'Dor Va-Dor, we continue that process of change and adaptation by applying the findings of science and the methodology of science, which is rational thinking, to Judaism. So what we're doing, you can call it cosmic Judaism, or you could call it evolutionary Judaism or inspirational Judaism. This is the whole thrust of what Judaism has always been. It's not something that's an aberration. It is what Judaism has been, and we're returning back to form. So, and as Andy says, they ask, why doesn't the Torah just say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why does it repeat the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? It's very redundant. And as Andy read, and what my father taught and what Jews have said is that because the God of Abraham is different than the God of Isaac, different than the God of Jacob, and the God of 21st century America is different than the God of the Torah because we know a lot more. And the God of every person here is different because we have our own views, our own ideas, and our own way of interpreting our traditions and our own way of applying logic. Now, some people don't use logic, and they come up with some weird, bizarre ideas that probably are going to be filled with errors. But if you have a rational approach and you use your own common sense and your own experience, you can come up with your own rational view of God, and then we can discuss and compare. I apologize for that long explanation, but I thought
Peter
it was
has his hand
my
up.
dad's words.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to
Peter.
comment on all of that?
Yeah. Andy, you had your hand up too.
Well, I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay, thank you. This is amazing because I told a story before, and I told Rabbi Barry that I normally like to incorporate what I have learned or what I have read, following what he has to say about a certain subject matter. He just read my mind in a sense, Rabbi Barry. You really just read my mind, because I have brought this up before, and I'm gonna put it in a nutshell. I'm of the opinion, and I think it's vitally important, and Andy actually explained this priorly before you started to talk, Barry, that I'm of the opinion, and it is vitally important to remember that there's a difference between a rational rabbi and an irrational rabbi. And the expansion of L'Dor Va-Dor has a standardness that is based on rationality, not a fairy tale, nothing delusional. And I've heard it all. Okay, as I've mentioned before, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that's the beauty of Rabbi Barry. He is a rational rabbi. That's what I appreciate most. It's one of the things I appreciate most. And I needed to bring out that point of the difference between a rational thinking rabbi and an irrational thinking rabbi. And you just mentioned it, Barry. So thank you. And I wanted to add to that.
Thank you very much, Peter. And there might be people are going to differ from me, because reason doesn't always come to the same conclusion. Some people will evaluate the evidence and the facts differently. But what we do here that is different is that we apply reason and follow the reason and the logic and the science wherever it leads. So if somebody can explain, no, I think, Rabbi, you're off. This is where I think rational thought leads, or where the scientific evidence leads. We can take L'Dor Va-Dor in a different direction. It's not up to me. It's up to everyone using the same standard, like Peter says, using the standard of reason and rational thought. We can create the Judaism of tomorrow. And it's all based on rational thinking and discussion. Go ahead, Andy.
So I'm going to screen share again, and I want to share. Let's see, where are those documents? Is that it? Maybe, yes, there they are. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, so getting back to innovation, perhaps the single most lucid change, and I believe this came initially with Reconstructionism, the 20s and 30s, was the inclusion of women in the liturgy. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, or Rachel, Leah, however you want to order that. And so here's an interesting page, one of the prayer books I've put together. You've got the images of the matriarchs and patriarchs. And there are some iconic passages in our tradition. Of course, the Shema and the Ve'ahavta are one of them. There are many. But in terms of the Amidah, the opening paragraph is the avot, and now, because of rational, lucid, inclusive rabbis, the imahot, or emot, however you want to use the terminology of men and women, fathers and mothers. So, and you're familiar with the melody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, and so forth. Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Okay, so I want to scroll down to the bottom of this page, and I'm going to ask one of you guys to read, maybe Valerie, would you please read the translation in the bubble, if you'd be so kind.
Acknowledging our ancestors reminds us that we are is shaped by who we were, by who they were. Just as an acorn is shaped by the oak that preceded it and yet gives birth to a tree uniquely its own. So we are shaped by our ancestors, yet give rise to a Judaism all our own.
And Holy One of Blessing.
Blessing, Sarah's helper, Abraham's shield.
Okay, and Rami Shapiro is one of my favorite rabbis to reference. So I will move on to one more thing. I want to do a song, and then we'll open it up to conversation and back to Rabbi. So I shared this song with Rabbi, and there's some verbiage here he's uncomfortable with, and I'm happy to have him focus on that. And I've asked him to perhaps consider how this might be rewritten. But the reason why I want to share this is it's an English rendering of the Hebrew you just heard. And it goes like this. We praise you, Adonai our God, God of Abraham, God of Sarah, God of Isaac, God of Rebekah, God of Jacob, God of Rachel and Leah, God of all generations, to uphold the falling, to heal the sick, to free the captive, to comfort all who suffer pain. And that little line actually comes from the Gevurot. God, the source of power of all the universe, can do all that. And actually, we represent God. We are God's representatives. We can uphold the falling and heal the sick and free the captive and comfort who suffer pain. So it's not just some other entity. We are the embodiment of God. And so we don't have to wait for some other entity. We have free agency. Here we go. To uphold the falling, to heal the sick, to free the captive, to comfort all who suffer pain. We praise you, Adonai our God. And we can, blessed is our God, shield of our ancestors. Blessed is our God, creator of life. One more time. Blessed is our God, shield of our ancestors. Blessed is our God, creator of life. Okay, I'll stop screen share. So basically, I know Rabbi has a very direct concern about how we frame God, how we define God, but in keeping with tradition, we have to start at some point from what we grew up with, and how do we change that to fit Rabbi Barry's vision of this newer iteration?
Well, I appreciate your sharing the discussions that we've had. And of course, I'm totally open to anyone, like you often do, sharing your ideas. And my ideas are not set in stone, and L'Dor Va-Dor is open to the process. It's kind of like science. Science has a certain methodology, trial and error, hypotheses, look at the evidence. And then the evidence might show that something that we've been doing doesn't make sense, or there's a better way. And so at L'Dor Va-Dor, there's no fixed version of what it is. It's just commitment to the rational thinking and the scientific method. Regarding that particular passage, the reason why I'm uncomfortable with it is because there's a lot of baggage associated with the term God, and it's usually associated with the supernatural being of the Torah. And so I'm very concerned that we draw a distinction so that people don't fall back into that and realize that that's not what we have in mind. We have a different version. When you start saying something that God heals the captive, frees the captive, heals the sick, and frees all of the, well, a lot of people think that that's what God's doing, but there is nobody doing that. There's nobody there are captives who don't get freed. There's sick people who don't get healed. And there's a lot of suffering in the world, and there's no supernatural entity taking care of that. So there might be a way of rephrasing it. It could be that if you want to, but I think we have to be careful about that so we don't just slip into old habits, and then it just becomes kind of like what I believe Reform Judaism has done, Orthodox life. So if you wanted to say that this creative power at work has the potential to do these things, and we have the ability to tap into that power to make this happen. If the wording was altered in that way, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I do have a problem when it harkens back to an antiquated notion that doesn't fit the evidence, because I think it's very, I don't know, it's very disappointing and cynical to just say, well, God does all these things and he takes care of everything, so we don't have to. And when in actuality, there's a lot of suffering going on in the world. I will just mention one other thing before I get to Sharon. You read about the imot, the imahot, and the avot and the imahot. The imahot reminds us that we have the ability to emot, which means to show our feelings. And avot reminds us that our ancestors have avot, but they don't have avita. So that's how I tie in the avot and the imahot. Go ahead, Sharon.
Well, one thing I wanted just to share that on Saturday evening, November 20th, that Andy and I will be doing a Shabbat, Shira, and Havdalah service on Zoom. Andy leads that, and I just kind of go along for the ride, hosting it on Zoom. And we had a very successful one at the end of July. We had a lot of people participating, and I hope that you'll consider participating on November 20th. And it should be a very, very nice evening. What you were just saying, Rabbi, and it reminded me of an email that Harris Friedman sent this morning. I won't go into the entire story, but I'll summarize it. There's a big flood, a really big storm, a hurricane or whatever, and a guy is hanging by a thread, and he's praying to God that to get him out of his house and to save him. And a policeman comes along and says, "Come on," and he goes, "No, no, no, I'm waiting for God to save me." And then he climbs onto the second floor, and somebody comes by, and a guy in a boat says, "Come on, jump into the boat." And he goes, "No, no, no, I'm waiting for God to save me." And then a helicopter comes, he's on the top of the roof, and they said, let's take you out. And he goes, "No, no, no, God will save me." And of course, the flood comes up to the top of the house. He passes away, drowns in the water. And when he gets to the door of God, he says, "God, I prayed to you. I prayed for you. I asked you to help me." And God said, "I sent you a policeman. I sent you a fire truck. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. You turned them down."
That's a great
It reminded me of that, that you pray and pray and pray, but you have to want to do it yourself. And that's what I wanted to share.
Sharon, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that with us. All right. Anybody else want to share some thoughts?
We have a guest with us tonight. He's a Holocaust survivor. He might have something he wants to share with us.
Herschel.
You're muted. You want to unmute? You want to say anything? Right, you're muted, honey.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can.
Well, the reason I am with you tonight is to remind you as to what has happened on November the 3rd of 1943. And in the vicinity of a Polish town called Lublin. And this really was one of the
You're sleeping. No, I'm not.
the most murderous day in the history of the Holocaust. On that day, 43,000 innocent souls were murdered in a space of 48 hours. And this is the anniversary that's coming up tomorrow. And I beg of you to really light a candle or say a prayer for the innocent souls who were murdered. They cleaned out the camp of Majdanek, Poniatowo, Travniki, and Flutplatz. Every Jewish person being in there was brutally murdered. And I don't use the word perish, because they did not perish, they were murdered. And that's probably the reason that I would like just about anyone who believes in the matter of Holocaust to observe this day. it was a tragedy. It was a tragedy. Now, I was fortunate enough to be taken out of this camp of Majdanek several weeks prior to this. And I was sold literally with 3,000 other souls to an ammunition factory called Hasag. And this probably saved my life. But tomorrow is a day of sorrow. And kindly, if I may, I would ask you to observe it as best you can. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And thank you for joining us to bear testimony to what occurred. We will remember that day, and we will light a candle. And we're also going to be speaking about and addressing the horrible precursor of the Holocaust, Kristallnacht. We'll be observing that. In fact, I recorded the Shabbat celebration, and we discussed Kristallnacht. And I thank you for bearing witness. Would you like to share any thoughts with us about the discussion we had about God and whether he heals the sick and frees the captive? Do you have it based on your experience?
I would like to share with you as to what entitles me to call myself a Holocaust survivor. I come from the city of Warsaw, and I've been there throughout the ghetto, from its inception to the very, very end. I was taken out of there on May the 3rd of 1943 during the heroic Jewish uprising. And where did I go? I landed in one of the 6 camps designated specifically for murdering Jews, and that camp was Majdanek. And for the grace of God, I don't know, people asking how did I survive? It's just a matter of providence, not on my wits because I was a child, certainly not on my strength because they will be much stronger than I. It was just the will of God. And for that, I'm thankful. I'm often asked, did I lose my belief? Absolutely not. It only strengthened it. And as I said, it's just what they call an Yiddish bashert, that I am alive. And I believe the reason for it is so I could share with some students primarily and people around us to let them know as to what the Holocaust was all about. We go to visit schools and really young people do not know at all anything, even how to spell the word of Holocaust. So we hope that with our action, we'll be able to get rid of a 4-letter word that was the cause of all these same mishaps. And that word is hate. Once we get rid of that, replace it with another 4-letter word, love, then we're going to have peace on earth. Thank you.
Did you actually witness the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising?
I was in it, Rabbi, from the beginning. When it started on April the 19th, on the eve of our Passover holidays. I was with it until the May the 3rd. And I believe that out of the original amount of Jews being there, that was close to 500,000, only like 50,000 of us was left. And we were there, probably a week after I left there, after they took me to Majdanek, the ghetto was liquidated in its entirety. So I have witnessed the heroic Jewish uprising. Did I take part in it? No, because I was too young.
How old were you?
By then, maybe like not quite 13. I started when I was 10.
Can you describe what happened?
I'm sorry?
Can you describe what you witnessed at the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising?
Yes. Unfortunately, it started up very, very late because the Germans were masters of deception. They started to emptying out the ghetto promising that we're going to go to a place where there's enough food. There's really schools for the children and work for the elders. They really painted utopia, and blindly we followed believing them, because we still believe maybe there is a little bit of culture left out. Absolutely not. Murderers from day one. And of course, towards the very end, we consisted of 183 calories per day if you worked. And there came a day that the ghetto was liquidated, I was taken with my mom and only sister, thrown into a wagon. That was 120 of us. And for that journey, we received 2 buckets, a 5-gallon bucket full of water and a 5-gallon bucket to relieve yourself for 120 people. So as a consequence of this, when we arrived in the city of Lublin, 12 people in my wagon suffocated. When somebody sweated, someone reached over just to wipe the sweat of their faces to moisten their lips. You can go without food for a while. It's not pleasant, but tolerable. But if you go without liquids, your body starts to dehydrate and starts closing down. And this is what was happening. And when did we land? In the extermination camp of Majdanek. It was one of the 6 camps just to get rid of us.
How did you get out of the Warsaw Ghetto during the fighting? How were you able to get out with others?
I was not able to get out. They took me out.
Who took you out?
The Germans. At the very end was the liquidation. I stayed with my mother, who worked in a place that was very, very essential to the German economy. They made parts for the airplanes. Yet it was more important to get rid of the Jews than to keep on flying. And out of there, they took me out with my sister, and they liquidated the place. And when we arrived in Majdanek, immediately they separated men from women. And this was the last time that I did see my mother and sister. I asked one of the old timers that was there like 5-6 weeks, do you know who my mother and sister are? Yeah. He pointed to a chimney spewing ashes and belching flames 24/7. And this, he tells a 13-year-old, this is where your mother is. Hard to think, yes. But for the will of God, here I am. And it's, as I said before, it's Bashert.
Well, you certainly have our sympathies and our condolences for everything that you've had to endure and for the horrors
Thank you.
that you witnessed.
Rabbi, I was not the only one. There were 6 million of us, innocent souls. And what was their crime? Basically, none. Just to be born into the Jewish religion. So we must keep, listen, what was our reward? The reward is that Hashem gave us the privilege of having the state of Israel. And all of us must see that this country stays strong. That I, as a child, was told 1,000,001 times, hey, Jew, go to Palestine. This is what I grew up with, in the capital of a country.
Do you think that that was part of God's plan to orchestrate the Holocaust as a way to establish the state of Israel?
Rabbi, I cannot sit in judgment. I have no right to do so. But the fact bail out themselves. We have a state, and you are welcome to it, because there was absolutely no place for us to go, no place to run out of Europe, to nowhere. Nobody wanted to accept anyone. And now you are a citizen of a country that God just blessed them forever.
Yeah, well, the discussion that we had earlier about the changing concept of God was experienced by quite a few Holocaust survivors, because the view that they had of God, as explaining before, someone who watches over us and protects us and helps us, that view for many Holocaust survivors went up in the ashes of Auschwitz and was buried with the bodies of Babi Yar. That view of God was never the same, and they couldn't accept it. And so they reformed, they changed, they had a different concept of God, not as a divine protector, but something a little amorphous, something like what we believe at L'Dor Va-Dor, or some of them gave up the view completely, but they refused to believe that it was part of God's plan, that some should be saved and 6 million would be killed. And they also refused to believe that God would orchestrate a plan of such horror in order to establish Israel, when it could have been done in a much simpler and less barbaric way. I think also we need to think about the Holocaust, and when we observe Kristallnacht and we observe November 3rd, as you were mentioning, which was a day of such utter horror and murder, we can't just say that it was caused by hate. We have an obligation to ask, where did the hate come from? And why is it that there's hate in the human heart? What can we learn from that horrific experience to try to overcome hate? And the theologians and the scholars have told us that that hate was not something that people were born into. It was taught to them. It was ingrained in them by 2,000 years of Christian anti-Semitism, and teaching that the Jews killed Jesus, and teaching that the Jews were condemned by God, and teaching that the Jews were destined to go to hell, and teaching that the Jews were responsible for the ills of the world, and teaching that they need to be eliminated. A lot of these people didn't have hate. They thought they were doing God's will. They thought that they were doing something to heal the world according to what they were taught in church. And so we need to ask, how did this happen and how can we transcend it? And I think the answer is quite clear. Irrational religion, irrational political beliefs, irrational thinking leads to killing and to death and to all types of horrors. And
children up to the 4th year of their lives, they hug each other. They don't know anything about it until they're being infused with poison by their elders. Yes, this happened against our religion and all. And they sometimes talking to underdeveloped minds. Well, let's say, with all due respect, a priest will talk to people who do not know how to sign their name, and they believe in him, and he's got hatred in his heart. And what happens? Holocausts.
Yeah, well, these we see it today too. There are children who are taught to hate Jews, raised by a Hamas and a Hezbollah, and they're taught the same thing, just like the killers at 9/11, Al Qaeda and Bin Laden. Bin Laden was a nice kid until he was brainwashed in a mosque. So I think we need to learn the lesson of history, which is we must challenge irrational religion. If we don't, and we just allow people to believe whatever they want, children will be indoctrinated to become our killers, and there will never, ever be peace in this world. I think that's the real lesson, or one of the many lessons of the Holocaust. The other was expressed by Joachim Prinz, a rabbi from Berlin, who escaped the horrors. And he said one thing that he learned, one of the lessons that he learned from the Holocaust, is that the worst sin, the worst evil in the world is not bigotry and it's not hatred. It's silence. It's shameful and it leads to death and destruction. And then he said these words in 1963, right before the Martin Luther King speech in the March on Washington. He was the lead-up speaker to Martin Luther King. And he said that the United States has become a nation of onlookers. And he was comparing it to what he saw. And he said that we must never be a nation of onlookers. We must speak up and we must end the silence. And the real lesson of the Holocaust is that silence is not golden. It kills. And we should never be silent to any bigotry. And we shouldn't be silent when the earth is threatened by any number of things like climate change or religious fanaticism or whatever. That's the real lesson of the Holocaust, that silence is a killer. Go ahead, Andy.
So real quick, following up on that, you know, in this country, we as since the founding of this country, we have some sins to atone for to the Native Americans, to the African Americans. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to do tikkun olam.
Thank you. Go ahead. Anybody else?
Okay, I'll share
Yes.
with you as to what I have in my memorabilia. Hold on for a minute, please.
Sharon, do you know this gentleman's first name? I can't see it on the screen.
No, it's, I want to say Hirsch, could be Hirsch. Ask him, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I know he's been on before. I think it's
Write
Hirsch.
down his email, Sharon, and you can email him, connect with him.
Yeah, H.
It's
Norshall.
H.
Yeah.
Norshall at AOL.
He's still on AOL like I am.
This is a jacket given to me in Bohemwald in 1944 when I was transferred from the Polish factory of in Skorzysko. And this is what was given to me. And of course, I was deprived of a name. I was simply known by a number. So my
Well,
life,
we want to know your name now. Is your first name Hirsch?
I'm sorry, would you repeat it, please?
Well, here you have a name. We're not sure of your first name. Is it Hirsch? Is that your name?
I don't quite.
What is your first name? We see your email address, but I don't see your name.
My name is on the email.
Well, what's your name?
My name is Norman Fragman.
Norman.
My email address is hnorshall@aol.com.
What's your first name? Horace?
Norman.
Oh, Norman. Thank you, Norman. Thank you for sharing your testimony and your and the shirt that they gave you to wear. You have the floor today, Norman. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
Well, my aim in life, I'm over 90 years old, Rabbi. And my aim in life is to bring peace on earth. And most of all, I want everyone to know what hatred is about and what it can bring to. Every organized religion is vulnerable. Yesterday it was against the Jews, today it could be against Christians, Muslims, anyone. So we just have to be on guard and not to hate. This is the
Thank
message.
you.
Get rid of hatred and you have peace on earth. I don't live for myself, I live for my grandchildren. I want to live in a peaceful world.
Thank you so much. You know, we had Pastor Fritz Auftenkamp on, and he explained where he thinks the hatred comes from as well, which helps shape my views. And he said that when he was a Christian pastor, he taught that God hated the Jews and that we were going to be sent to hell. And he now condemns that teaching. And many Christian scholars have said that's precisely where the hate comes from. It's a doctrine that was actually originated by the Jewish people with the chosen people concept, that God told us that we had the right to kill others in his name And then it metastasized into variants in Christianity and Islam, teaching that God ordered them to kill in his name against non-believers. And that is precisely why it is so important that our message gets out that all religion should become rational and not ascribed to supernatural hate mongers that are telling us to hate and kill in his name. That is one of the original crimes of Western religion. And it's a mistake to bracket all religion together and say that they're all bad, they're all teaching hate, they're all leading to conflict. They do not. There are many forms of religion that lead to love and to harmony and to peace. We humans need to use our rational minds to be able to distinguish between the two so that we can promote religion that's going to build bridges and challenge and fight against religions that are going to build walls of separation. And as I mentioned before, we really need to show discernment about what parts of our heritage we adopt and which ones we reject. And I think that our mission is very, very important because today, as we speak, there is still horrible anti-Semitism going on in many parts of Europe, in Israel, in the United Nations, across the globe. Terrible anti-Semitism because the religions of the world have not come to terms with what Fritz was telling us about the anti-Semitism that's inherent and built into their scriptures and their religious practice. And if we don't point that out, I'm not sure who will.
Rabbi, I've been back 3 times with the March of the Living, and I know their language. Nothing has changed. It's covered up, but it's still there. So we just have to find a way of peace and making other people understand what transpired if you hate.
Well, one of those ways, Norman, is to do what you're doing, to bear witness and to bear testimony. We congratulate you and we thank you for having the courage at your age.
I am not eternal.
I know.
And people have to understand that after we're gone, I want to leave a better world. I'd like to.
Norman, you are not eternal, but your message is, and this video is. This video will be here, as far as we know, permanently. We're not taking it down. And your words and your courage and your testimony will be here as long as there's a L'Dor Va-Dor. And we thank you for being with us and sharing.
I don't
your
deserve it,
understanding.
really. It's just our duty in life to make sure that the reason that I survive is to share with others what hatred is capable of producing. I don't want to take any glory for it, forget it. It's not important, but for the grace of God, here I'm here.
Yeah.
There's a reason for my survival.
Well, for your survival, you might not be able to claim credit for it, but for using your survival to be a blessing and a witness and to bear testimony, we give you all the credit and all the glory that you deserve, and we thank you. You're still going strong and still speaking out, and you're using your survival to bear witness and testimony for those who didn't make it, and we thank you for that.
Well, God bless all your members, because the fact that they do believe in religion bears out a lot of things. You have to have a belief. You have to know, I know who I am. And my devotion is to what I believe in.
Yeah.
I try to be with it as best I can. But I've reached a stage in life that there's a conflict between body and soul. My soul says, do. My body says, hey, buddy, where you going? I'm over 90, Rabbi.
Yeah. Well, when you're young, if you drop something on the ground, you pick it up. When you get older, you think, Do I really need it? Is it really worth bending over to pick that up? That's one of the signs of old age. So I agree with you, Norman, that we do need to believe in something, but hopefully what we believe is accurate and rational and based on clear thinking. If not, anything goes. It was Christopher Hitchens who said, good people do good things and bad people do bad things. But to get good people to do bad things, that takes religion. And I would refine that to say that takes irrational religion. And so we do want to believe something, but hopefully we're going to believe something that makes sense, is consistent with science and reason, and will allow us to reach out and love to other people. Norman, after all you've gone through and all the hate that you've experienced, to be able to come out of that with a loving heart and a loving spirit towards other people is just an amazing thing. You have a wonderful neshama, and thank you for sharing it with us.
I could only say one thing. Am Israel Chai.
Thank you very much. Am Yisrael Chai. And maybe that means the people of Israel lives. Maybe Andy, if I know it's impromptu, but maybe we could finish with Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Norman. Thank you, Sharon, for organizing this. Andy, always a pleasure to hear not only your beautiful music, but your wonderful ideas and your contributions. And I thank everyone here. Thank you everyone here for joining in this broadcast and for also helping to preserve the testimony that Norman gave us today.
Well, playing a little bit, riffing on some of Barry's wordsmith stuff. I was waiting for an encore or a record, or we'll be in accord. We can sing Hatikva, and we can end with Ushafta Mayim Bisason, draw joy from the wells. So, okay, so here we go with the Ushafta Mayim. Perfect. Here we go. Ushaftem mayim bisason mimane hayeshua. Shaftem mayim bisason mimane hayeshua. Mayim. Hey mayim bisason. Mayim. Hey mayim bisason. Hey. Mayim bisason, mayim bisason.
Andy, you do a fine job with that, but I'd like to hear Norman's a cappella version of it if we could. All right, Norman, go ahead. You have the floor. Would you like to share Uvashachta Mayim with us?
Forgive me, I did not.
Would you like to sing that song for us? Uvashachta Mayim.
I don't know how my voice carries.
Yeah, your voice is very good. You have a strong voice. Go ahead. We'd love to hear it.
You've heard it. Shaftem Mayim Bisason, my name Yeshua. Shaftem Mayim Bisason, my name Yeshua. Mayim Bisason, Mayim Bisason. That's dedicated to water, my friends.
Hey, I'll drink to that. And do you want to close with Hatikva?
Sure, let's close with Hatikva. Thank you, Norman. That was beautiful. I've never heard the song sung so beautifully.
Thank you.
Kolot baleva penima nefesh Yehudi omia ufa'atei mizra kadima ayin לציון סופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, בהיותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. Thank you, Norman, and thank you, everybody. Before we go, I just want to share some news with you. We do have our annual meeting, or not an annual meeting, but a special congregational meeting coming up to choose leaders of L'Dor Va-Dor and to select board members. We already have some board members, and some of them will be running again, but we have openings. And if there's anyone who's interested in serving on the board, you can still be nominated from the floor, and you can still submit your name and toss your yarmulke into the ring. That's going to be on that's a Monday night, I believe, at 7. It's going to be by Zoom, so you can do it from the safety of your own home. Some of you may know that a while back, we were searching for a president, and Sandy Lopater was kind enough to step up and say that he would do it. And for all these years, he's been carrying that burden on his shoulders. I'm happy to announce that my brother Noah has now tossed his hat into the ring. And so we can now have a democratic process to see who the congregation would like to lead us into the next phase and the next chapter. So he has offered his candidacy for president of L'Dor Va-Dor. I will not indicate my preference as far as the candidates go. I will remain neutral at this time, but I do recommend that you find out about them and find out about the other candidates who are running for office, and also see if you would like to run or if you know somebody who would, because this is a very dynamic congregation. And this year, we're going to build back better. This year, we plan to go back into our own building. This year, we plan to do new and exciting things, possibly merging, possibly joining with other groups. We're going to come back better than ever before with our modern technology that we have, and a lot of innovations. We're very excited. And if you would like to be part of the leadership, come and submit your name. Or if you just like to be part of the congregation, please join us, and you'll have a seat at the table and a vote, but not a veto. And so it's been great being with everybody tonight. Thank you all for joining with us. We appreciate your support of Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor. Norman, live long and prosper. And relieve me, you thought that your voice was a little weak. Your voice is strong and powerful, and thank you for sharing it with us.